Good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and get our fifth Tuesday meeting underway. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If former Commissioner Katie would lead us tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate you coming out and joining us this evening. We have, I think, a very informative agenda this evening. Special thanks to North Mason School District, as always, for hosting us tonight. We're happy to be up here in Commissioner Netherland's district, up here in Belfair. So it's looking forward to a good meeting. So we'll begin with our open forum for citizen input. As we do it down Shelton during our regular meetings, we have about a 15-minute comment period. So if you have comments on items that aren't on tonight's agenda, you can please come forward and Chair will recognize you and be mindful of the time.
Do you want me to speak into that?
I think if you could try and speak into the microphone there or there, that way we can pick it up on TV.
Okay? It'll look a little better than bending down to it.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll be brief. First, I'd like to commend Jason Wells with your GIS department. Many of the streams in the critical areas in the Belfair UGA were never identified, or they were put in the wrong place. And he's in the process. I've been working with him, trying to get those in the right place, and I just wanted to commend him. Secondly, last December, two of the commission came up to Belfair and had a sewer meeting with us. And we haven't heard any updates or anything about that, and I think it would perhaps the next fifth Tuesday meeting, if you could put something together regarding the sewer, I think people would like to hear what's happening with that. And then I was just informed that the Planning Commission has a real aggressive schedule and docket over the next several months. And one of the items is a new section on development regs regarding establishing a new public benefit rating system for open space classification. And I would encourage the planning department to reach out to the current owners enrolled in open space classifications so that both you and the owners don't get blindsided, as this involves some rather significant changes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else for public comment?
I'm Herb Gerhardt. When I came down to your commissioner meeting and I made the comment about the only way I saw out of the budget dilemma was for a tax increase. I was fully supportive of a tax increase. However, the way the wording went, you're including a general fund in there. I have very little trust in my commissioners as far as where that money's going to go and how the split is going to go. I would like to see, and I think there's lots of voters out there that are thinking the same way. I've had lots of people tell me, there ain't no way I'm going to vote for that, not go in the general fund. I think you people need to come out with a written commitment of here's how we intend to split that money so that the voters know. Otherwise, I think this is going to go down to defeat, and you can't afford to have it go down to defeat. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, seeing no one else for public comment at this time, I'll move on to item number 4, which is an informational update for the Belfair transportation study. We have Thera Black with us from SCJ Alliance. I've had the opportunity to work with Thera as both a member of the Planning Advisory Commission and now as a Mason County Commissioner, and I'm very happy that her and the staff from SCJ are maybe we can...
Yeah, let's do a little different than that.
Yeah.
I'll sit back here. Thank you.
So I appreciate SCJ's willingness to engage the members of the community to talk about projects in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Thera. And
Thank
you
you.
for
Where
being
would
here.
you like me to speak from?
If you
It
could-
would be-
maybe from up here, if you could,
Sure.
that way we have everybody.
Sure. And I have a pretty loud voice, so hopefully I'm close enough to the mics that this works for you. It's really a pleasure to get to brief you tonight. We were in Belfair last night, which was really great. We were invited by the North Mason Community Voice to participate in their forum. We had about 70 people attend, and it's really wonderful to see so many faces tonight that I recognize that were there last night. So this was really our kickoff meeting with the Belfair community, North Mason community, for the Belfair Mobility Plan. And this came out of the transportation plan update that recommended that mobility piece of the sub-area plan, the Belfair sub-area plan, be updated to take into consideration everything that's happened in the last several years, the completion of SR3, and to position Mason County to take best advantage of funding opportunities and all that are coming up. So what we did with that was we spent the first, I'm going to say half hour, 40 minutes, providing the community with sort of some background information, the planning context, reminding people how we got here, that we're not starting from scratch. We really drove home the point about the importance of that sub-area plan, because while it wasn't by itself responsible for getting the funding for SR3, the fact that those improvements were identified in there made it much easier for the legislature to support the funding for that project. So that work is wrapping up, that first phase. What we heard last night very strongly was strong community support in phase 2 and extending that work on down. But what we did was we provided this background, we provided insights as to the plans that had gotten us to this point, and talked about our process, what we're doing with the mobility plan, which is sort of updating our transportation priorities, making sure that the plan is supporting the community's vision for the Belfair area to the best of its capacity, figuring out what those next funding priorities are. Key in there are figuring out how do we connect between SR3 and the new Belfair bypass. How do we, what sort of mobility issues might have come up that were not addressed by the SR3 project, and have any hot spots moved or changed? How do we improve the walkability of the Belfair area? How do we do that without having a heavy impact on the environment? And figuring out what those next funding priorities are. Also in there is talking about how do we make sure that when the bypass goes in, that we get to harness all the good opportunities that come out of that for the Belfair Business District and not have it negatively impact the Belfair District. So all of that's part of this mobility plan. After some background with that, then we opened it up for community conversation, questions, answers. We heard a lot about SR3, completing SR3, the importance of that. We heard a lot of questions about what happens at either end of the bypass. So the community out there has a lot of questions about that. That is outside of our purview to answer. It's a state project. But we're certainly going to take all this input that we hear and feed that back into the state process. We heard a lot of discussion questions about the bypass connections down to SR3, the value of them, both in terms of mobility, but also emergency management, route redundancy. We heard some really interesting, compelling information about a trail network, extending a trail system from Belfair State Park into town, and then ideally connecting that up with the Thaler Wetland Complex and those trails in there. So we heard a lot of different ideas came out. We heard that some of the intersections aren't working quite right in town still, so we want to really zoom in and take a look at that. I was explaining to people last night that when we do these traffic studies, we typically go out and we collect traffic counts, especially around intersections, to try to understand how the intersections are operating. And a concern came up. Somebody advised us, said, be careful, great, you've missed the construction season, but you've also missed the heavy tourist season. So we will be very careful about how we inflate these numbers with what we call a seasonal adjustment to make sure that we're not undercounting and estimating the traffic impacts in there. So it was a really great, there was a lot of back and forth. A lot of questions came up. I'm not sure, but that most of the people left still skeptical as to whether or not the Belfair bypass will really be built. I tried my darndest to assure them that it really is on the books, really is funded. But for a community that's heard this over and over for decades, I think there's just a healthy skepticism until they get to actually see the bulldozers in place. But we did want to let everybody know, and certainly anybody here tonight who wasn't there last night, know that the project is fully funded, and it is that work will start getting underway in summer of 2019. And you won't see bulldozers moving in 2019. That they expect that work will happen about 2022. But starting in 2019, the funding will be there to do their sort of their engineering studies, revalidate their assumptions, decide what is really going to happen on those endpoints, and start doing the right-of-way acquisition. So that really is scheduled and funded. We got a lot of smaller questions that we'll funnel back on to the DOT, and in fact, just tonight, somebody was mentioning something else that popped up, where the turning movements into and out of the southern and roadway entrance to the post office doesn't seem to work quite right. So this is a great opportunity to get those types of ideas out on the table and get those funneled out, but at the end, the mobility plan is really going to focus on some bigger the bigger issues and the priorities for Belfair. I would encourage anybody who might be listening to your meeting tonight, or anybody here who wasn't there, to go check out Mason Web TV. It's already up there, so they can watch the forum themselves. The other thing I would share is that we are welcoming any comments at any point, and so everybody last night was handed a little program that we also have here tonight, or not a program, but just an informational brochure, and our contact information is on the back. The study itself is specific to the Belfair urban growth area, but like what we heard a lot last night was just outside of that urban growth area, because the Belfair community, while it's really small, it's a regionally significant location. And so just the ability for people who live on the Tahiti Peninsula to get in and out, the Belfair transportation system is what enables that. So while our focus is on this, we heard a lot last night about some issues on 300, the bridge over the Union River, certain things in there that people have concerns about, that while it's outside the scope of this, we'll make sure that we get that information funneled on to the right people and factor in those things that we can to this study. I would welcome any comments from people, what might be on people's minds about what works in Belfair in terms of the transportation system, what doesn't work right, how changes might have happened with the completion of phase 1 of the SR3 construction project. If you're noticing things that don't seem to be operating quite right, we can certainly get that information and pass that on to people. We're also interested in how the community perceives its downtown in Belfair, so that we can make sure that the transportation investments and improvements really help to create that sense of place and character. I think you can see very clearly with the SR3 improvements that it looks and feels and functions differently. And so this is a great opportunity to build on that and to create the kind of a downtown presence where it's a real destination that people, not just from Belfair and perhaps the immediate area around it, want to come into, but for people who are traveling through Belfair, that it's the kind of a place they say, this is the downtown and this is where I want to stop and visit and spend money or do something, really living up to its reputation as the gateway to Hood Canal and to the whole Olympic Peninsula. So that's sort of like it in a nutshell. I know that you're trying to fit a lot in here tonight. If there are any specific questions about the Belfair mobility plan, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I would really welcome any comments that people have. If you want to watch the Mason Web TV and have where there was a PowerPoint presentation and maps and all that, you can take a look at it. one of the things in particular we really wanted to stress with this as we go into it is that we know that there are some very real constraints that are going to govern what goes in this plan. And so sort of in the shorthand, slightly tongue-in-cheek way, we were saying it last night as we get it, Belfair is very steep and Belfair is very wet. And so we need to be really cognizant of that and not put forward proposals or ideas that really are not financially feasible or really logistically cannot actually really be built. So we're aware of that, and we had some images last night just sort of explaining to people how just even the slope of the land really affects the project cost. And those are things that we'll have to try to grapple with as we go forward. But as I've been reminded by more than one person in the community, don't get so obsessed on the money part that you keep everything else off the table that doesn't seem like it's realistic, because in 2003, when the Belfair sub-area plan had been adopted, had they taken that very strict notion of only put in here what we can afford to do, the SR3 project might not have actually made it into the plan. And if it hadn't been in the plan, it wouldn't have gotten funded. So we're going into it eyes wide open, aspirational, bounded by some reality checks here. But I think that by the end of this year, we'll have a really interesting plan for people to take a look at and comment on. The last thing I'll offer to you right now is that we'll have one more big public meeting before the planning process is done. But in between now and then, we intend to use a variety of means of engaging the public. So quick little push polls where we're asking for people's input on like 3 key questions, or we're sending some alternative design concepts out and asking for people's input on it. Certain things that we don't feel like we need to ask people to give up a whole evening of their time to come in, but where we really want their input. So we'll be reaching out to the public throughout the fall and early winter. And then the other last bit of information, which might be news for you, is that we are going to go ahead and proceed to put together a project website. I don't have the name of it yet, but it'll be something along the lines of belfairmobility.org or something like that. And you can link to it from the county website, but it's also a one-stop place where you can go and find all the background reports that have informed this study. You can find maps, you can find research that we're doing along the way, and plan concepts and all of that. So, and we will push that information out as soon as we have the official URL listed and that I can point people to. And we're hoping that we'll have that ready for you by the end of next week. So we're really wanting to turn that around. There was so much interest last night, and we really want to make sure that people have access to all the information that we have access to. It's a community that clearly cares about the future of Belfair, and there was a lot of really good ideas out there last night. And so one of the first things that you'll find on the website will be a really detailed meeting summary, and so everybody can understand the other issues and questions that people had raised. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it to you for how you would like to handle this, if you have questions or if you want questions from the floor. I'm just not 100% sure the best way to proceed.
Commissioner, do you have any questions?
I was there yesterday.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So with that, I would open it up to the floor, and then Dari can field questions.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, you can pick.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I just had one question. When was this map produced?
The map
I
was...
can't find a date on it.
Oh, well, thank you. I will put that on there. It was produced last Friday, so
From what documents?
we've pulled in the GIS layers that we've gotten from Mason County, and as you pointed out last night, so we know that the environmental, like the streams and wetlands are suspect. We're very aware of that, and so this was, we will tweak those as we go. We're not really set up to totally update all of the Mason County data, but we will catch those things as we can. And I think you had pointed out a stream to me last night, and we will make sure we get a map on there. We pull from a variety of data sources, but the road coverages, I believe the road coverages came, and the wetlands and environmental coverages came from Mason County.
Thank you.
Yes?
First of all, relative to dating the maps, when they were doing the sewers and stuff like that, Mason County put out map after map and failed to date almost all of them.
Okay.
And it became very important because the maps that a lot of them were using for reference were superseded by other maps by years in some cases. So it's really important to
Great reminder, thank you.
identify that. But I do have a question. Of the total amount of the bypass, okay? That's all state funded, right?
Correct.
Okay? And the interchanges are, if there are any interchanges, and as I asked last night, why specifically? Just because you can is not a good reason for if costs are prohibitive, because we have a very small population in Mason County, and we have as you are well aware of, and all of us here are well aware of, we have a Mason County sewage system located at Belfair that is multiple millions in debt, okay? I'll just say it that way. It's very, way above cost that the average county with limited population can afford. And so to me, it's very important that we're not the richest county to begin with. Demographics prove that. And so I caution you on even any intersection, or interchange, I should say, that will cause undue cost to our citizenry. It really, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm getting older. I just turned 74, so maybe I'm getting older, and all of a sudden after 20 years of retirement, fixed cost, my salary is not increasing, and everyone wants to do, and boy, to me, they have to have some real legitimate reasons for doing now, not just because we are authorized to have one or two interchanges. What's the specific reason? And then last night we were talking, or you mentioned, and I know you're not really tied into the start and the stop, but in my brief history here, 15 or 10 or 12 years, I guess, here at Belfair, one of the important things about the bypass was being able to hook into the 106 area comfortably. And as I heard last night, they were headed off through the ball field up here and coming in, I'm going to guess, somewhere on a Victor cutoff or something like that. And I was wondering if that's the case, they were going that way. Are they making any provisions, or again, is that now all of a sudden a county fix and a county cost to get from the bypass Highway 3 southern entrance, okay, back down to the 106 interchange? Because I'd be interested, if you're going to take traffic counts, check the number of communal traffic that goes out 106. There's a large portion that goes out that way, as well as goes farther south towards, as well as goes, North Shore also. And I found that kind of looked kind of cumbersome to me, but I didn't really pay much attention to it prior to that. And then I think I'll just, there was just a flat ass kind of a tone through the audience last night about what's the total cost of the quote-unquote bypass? What are we
67
authorized?
million. 67 million is what's in the budget.
And there was a sub-tone about, ain't it gonna happen for 60 million bucks, we're gonna be short somewhere. So where is that extra funding coming from? And if it comes from grants, is it 80-20, or is it 100% grant? Because the 80-20 thing has killed the population here, having to pay that 20. I'm done.
Okay.
Just so you know,
I promised, Randy.
That's all right, but on the 67 million, it was 108 million at one point, and that's what everybody remembers. One of the reasons why this was actually put in the gas taxes, this was one of the first ones that were what they're considered right-sized. What they did, instead of the 4 lanes built out with the bicycle lanes, with the extra buffers and all these things that they had that they thought were required, a lot of those requirements changed. It got right-sized down. They'll still have that much land. They'll have some buffer there, but it changed the price drastically when they took it down to a much smaller project. and they figured it could do it. Now, I personally still think there's gonna be an issue, because I don't care what you say it's gonna be today, if you add on 5, 7, 10 years, there's a percentage
Yeah,
of
something
increase
goes up.
that will occur. And the 106 connection aspect of it, so far what you've been hearing in the public is only the things that we're looking at from the past, but there are, and none of those included the 106 connector. There was a 101 connector that was talked about years ago that would have taken it further. That's not part of this, but there are some things the county's looking at.
Yeah, that's just a corridor that should be looked at and appreciated for the number of people that do go down that way. And again, it's cost to the county, so me and you and everyone else.
Yeah, we heard a lot about that intersection last night, and so I know that we will be kind of taking a really close look at that, and then as we were talking last night, we will try and evaluate wherever it seems to be the important connection points. Is there a way to get between A and B to get
Yeah, I really
safety?
didn't understand if that was in your purview or not, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
Yeah, no, so looking
didn't
at
know.
connections is figuring out the answer to exactly where the bypass is going to touch down is not. So, but we do know though, when DOT starts in 2019, those questions that you're asking about cost and what the endpoints look like, that is how their process is starting, is to really try to answer those questions with the community.
Great, thank you.
Anything else about Belfair? Oh, I'm sorry.
On the
Oh,
back.
hey, and thank you for your, I picked up your email on the way here tonight, so great example of, I would welcome comments
Well,
like that.
the way my handwriting is, I figured it wouldn't be fair. My comment was about the cost. I was not aware that the bypass was fully funded. And then again, like Randy said, I remember the numbers going from anywhere from 89 to about 120 million.
Yeah.
And just can't imagine how it could get down to 67. That seems like a wishful thinking, and we're gonna run into a budget crunch again.
Well, and I think Randy's point was spot on, that, so the way that they are approaching it, when I say fully funded, let's think of it almost like as phase one. And so they're thinking that they can, go ahead and get the ultimate corridor that would be needed in perpetuity, but don't build the ultimate footprint until you need it, because you don't need it right off the bat. So
But right
that
now
was
you-
the thinking, but
Right now, you don't even know where it's gonna come back out on Route 3 here. They may be just coming through this building, and somebody's gonna have to pay millions and millions of dollars.
It won't be.
it won't be through there.
No, I'm sure it won't be, but like I say, they don't know where it's gonna go, so I can't see how they can come up with a dollar amount. And as far as the midpoint or someplace for an interchange, like I said in my email, I fully support it. I think Romance Hill is not a commercial lane, but those poor people on Romance Hill, if there's a fire at the bottom of the hill or it's sheer ice or whatever, give them a half a chance to get out over the top. Don't lock them in. And as far as development up on top, that's what Mason County needs. And I don't care, David's here, I don't care how much money anybody makes in the process, as long as it's for the good of the people. And right now, we've got to grow.
Larry, I want to clarify something. The property on this side of the tracks, mainly all this over here, that's not.
Right, on that
I
side.
just wanted to clarify that.
But there's a good
No,
portion.
no, it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
So let the record show Herb is okay with David Overton making some money.
That's fine. I'm okay with anybody making money.
There you go.
The public's not the problem.
Oh, Ken, yes.
Sarah, thank you. I just wanted to point out that you said your office produced this map recently. They had the same map at the Mason Transit Authority public hearing, and it showed the same streams where that transit site was, and I pointed it out to Patrick about it. They really need to be ground truthed, because they either don't exist or they're in the wrong place. If we had had this information when we developed the sub-area plan, we probably would have had a better plan. And that brings me to my point, at some point you're going to produce this transportation element for the county. But I think it'd be really valuable to reestablish a sub-area planning group for Belfair. Something that once Sarah leaves, we still have a group of people that are committed and involved in the community and want to make things happen. Some of you, I listened to the conversation last night, and there was some concern about emergency access to the bypass. Well, you know, somewhere down the road, that plateau is going to develop, and maybe the North Mason Fire Authority will build another substation up on top there, so it won't really be the issue that, you know, it looks like it could be now. The same goes with the elementary school. It potentially might relocate at some point. So that would take some of the pressure off of Highway 3. So I think it's vitally important that a group like that be reestablished. Thank you.
I want to make a comment, as you mentioned earlier, Jason Wells, our whole world, people don't know it yet, but wait till you see the new mapping system that's coming about at this county. It's bringing us literally to a current status. It's extremely impressive, to where you'll be able to stand on a location using your phone and tap it, and it'll tell you where you're at, what the parcel is, and show you the overview, things that we never could have dreamed of. So we'll finally start to get straight maps. But I do want to make a comment, because we've always had questions about our maps and stuff like that. It looks like I see Taco Bell, so this one here seems to be fairly new. Taco Bell has not been there that long, so.
Now, Google Earth is rapidly updating.
Commissioner, the problem with that is Jason's working real hard at it, but he has to petition the DNR to get their approval to move these stream courses. So it's going to be a timely process. And that's why once Sarah leaves, we need to have some continuity in the community to continue on. Thank you.
I was wondering, a month ago, I was looking through the commissioner briefing documents, and there was land donated up at the top of Romance Hill, or they said they were going to donate it. Does that make a big difference when it comes down to if that's a road or not, or who owns it? And
Yeah, it doesn't really, where it influences our factors will be in the cost estimation. I'll be really honest with you, when you're talking about building on, in conditions like this, the construction cost and environmental mitigation dwarf right-of-way acquisition. So it's there, we're aware of it, but what we're really going to be looking at is how do you get from Romance, from the road that's there up and over the railroad tracks and the Navy Railroad and get into the vicinity of the bypass. And so those costs will they'll just completely dwarf. I mean, we are looking at probably $5.5 to $6 million just to get over tracks. So it's we are aware of that, which is really great to.
You mentioned last night that they were making viaducts or whatever you want to call them, over it instead of
Right, and that's the Navy Railroad has a requirement that, so just in transportation terminology, if you can just drive right over the train tracks, that's called like an at-grade crossing, and the Navy Railroad requires grade separation because of the business that they do, and so that means there'll be a structure either over or under the tracks. So you will not, and so that's what I mean when I say, thank you for pointing out that too, that that's what I mean when I say it cannot be an at-grade crossing. So that structure all by itself is $5.5 to $6 million, and then everything else that goes with it. So it's no small project, but it's definitely, I've heard a lot about Romance Hill, and we'll definitely take a look at that to see how we can best make that connection.
Our Pat still had a.
And then probably everybody knows around here that I'm on Newkirk Road. So when you talk about pushing Newkirk through, the state did a survey about 6 or 8 years ago. They came out, topoed the whole place. The surveyor standing in my driveway told me, can you believe that this would be 21 feet of fill to make grade in my driveway? And we're still talking about it. It's been taken on the road plan, off the road plan. I know other people would like to go through. If it was feasible, yeah. I own property right there. I live right there. It's like this. And I don't understand how they can keep talking about it when it's been proven once or twice that it's not feasible, because then you're right on the tracks too, so you gotta go over and under the tracks at that point too.
Well, hopefully with this plan, we can take, if there's things like this that have been hanging around for 15 or 20 years, maybe this is an opportunity where we
This is
can
what
reconcile
you and I
this.
actually talked
Yeah.
about. We talked about taking that off, about because of different issues that have gone on there for years internally.
It's been back and forth, and last 3-day weekend we had, the traffic was backed up past Newkirk on the old Belfair Highway. It was backed up past Log Yard Road and almost to Lake Flora. And I don't know how Newkirk's gonna make traffic flow better there, it's just gonna give them a different place to sit and wait in line to get through town.
Yeah, no.
It's tough, because there's gotta be an answer somewhere, but that one seems like it would be really expensive.
And the structure you're talking about is a county-funded structure.
Correct. Anything off of the bypass would be a county facility. Now, there are grants out there and all, but it's, yeah.
Is there any way the Navy could help out with that, or do we make a deal with the Navy and say, hey, man, we wanna do this, can you help us build that?
We have had conversations with the Navy, actually, separate from anything that there's.
Yeah, we're exploring all options.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's the way you gotta do it, but it just seems like it's been hit so many times.
Yeah. Anything else that, and we do, again, have these forms in the back, just so you can at least have a map of the area, and you'll have our contact information. Please, we love being emailed or called or whatever, so please stay in touch. Thanks. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Derek. Okay, very good.
Boxed in.
We can move to item number 5 on tonight's agenda, which is proposed changes to the Mason County sign code, and I invite Dave Wyndham.
All right, evening, Commissioners. So we passed out some documents, or had some documents at the back of the room, and I apologize. You guys didn't get the cool colored ones. So as a preface to this, I want to back up to this document here. Oops. About the U.S. Supreme Court issuing, it's called the Reed decision, and we've talked about this before. And that's kind of what's driving this reopening of the Belfair sign code. So, in a nutshell, the Supreme Court says, when you look at signage, this came out of a court case where there was a church that a sign up, and they move their meetings depending on where they can get room to set up. And they would set up a sign directing people to the church, and the city would make them take the sign down within an hour to 2 hours after church, but left political signs up for an extended period of time, even though they met the same size criteria and everything else was the same. And what the Supreme Court said was you can't regulate a sign based on its content. So as I dug into the Belfair sign code, it's chock full of things that aren't allowed by the Supreme Court decision. So we're going to be digging into it. When I just quickly highlighted my copy, and if you go through it, there is just an awful lot that's got to come out. So we can't make a distinction on what a sign is by what's written on the sign. We have to take into account a very narrow set of standards around location, construction, and size. So it really starts to get sticky when we talk about this other document, which I passed around, when it comes to political season, and what constitutes temporary signs and where they can go, and how we manage those during election season. So, for example, you can't say a real estate sign. It's a temporary sign. So we're going to have to reclassify a lot of signs based on their not on what they say, but really kind of on where they are and how long they're in a location. So we're going to be digging into this. We've already met with the Belfair Chamber of Commerce and start kicking around some ideas. As long as we're going to have this open to do a Supreme Court fix, let's open it up and do community standards and decide, as a community, how do we want our community to look? Do we like these feather signs that are sticking up? Do we not like feather signs? How do we want things to look? Do we want to get so narrow, like a Leavenworth or a Winthrop kind of a look? Or how do we want Belfair to look? So the plan is this fall, once the comprehensive plan is done and we have some time to start working on some of these things, is to come back up north and have some community meetings where we sit down and we go through the sign code. Once I've scrubbed the Supreme Court language and got that aligned, then let's come in and talk about how we want the community to look. So our goal is to come up, get input from the community, and then take that to the Planning Commission, then back again through the county commissioners. So We'll have to do with the Allen UGA, so we'll probably try to do both at the same time because their sign codes are identical. What's funny is if you look up the sign code for Saipan, it is this document. The Island Saipan has the same exact documents we use for Belfair. So, right, and one of them, what got me onto that is odor producing signs are not allowed. I haven't even figured out what an odor producing sign is yet, so they're not allowed. It's going to be an interesting process. We're going to get the community involved and start doing some community design work. And this is kind of a new step for us instead of having a one-size-fits-all designed by people. So, if you have any questions.
Questions? Any questions from the audience?
I would just say keep it as simple as you can. You don't want to make too many rules.
Right.
There's no reason to enforce them anything.
Right. So a lot of what we're doing is stripping up. So, yes.
The big billboard signs we have up now, any possibility of getting rid of them?
Some of them, actually, I got to looking, some of them are in violation from when the last time the sign code was changed. So we're going to be looking at those.
Well, they put those up real quick because of signage.
So we're going to look at those. And because some of them don't meet the current standard. So,
Well, the one on wildlife land is not going to get renewed from what I understand. So that only leaves one billboard left.
okay. So, and it'll affect pole signs, it'll affect signs on the trees, those sorts of things. So those are already not allowed, but we're going to have to look at placing those down.
For those that don't know, Dave and Paula is our planning manager, right? Correct. Things have changed a lot since they have come aboard. We did a unification of all the departments, did a one-stop shop with the idea of getting to yes and the idea of no wrong door. We felt behind a little bit, but there was a point when years ago it took 6 to 10 months to get a permit. Right now he has the last pieces coming in from a group that we contracted with. How long do you think we'll be down to for getting our permits out after you get that back?
Oh, we should be down less than 30 days. So we had a backlog, and rather than having people wait this fall, I contracted with a firm out of north of Seattle to come in and take a big stack of, it's basically this plan review is what gets us bogged down. We're unique among counties in that our building inspectors are also doing all the plans examining. So they do the plans examining, and then they go out to the field. So it creates a real bottleneck. So what we decided to do is to take some of those and contract to have them knocked out so everybody gets their building permits before the weather goes away.
But it's because of the way they've been doing business. We have some of our new stuff like the clinic that came in and that ran into some very big roadblocks, and they find a way to get to yes and get it done. And so just know that when you need anything, they're the ones to call, and they've been finding a way to really help everybody here. So.
Did you say one-stop shopping?
I don't know if you remember, you were around, you went to go get one thing, you had to go down the block, a couple blocks over.
Oh,
then they send you back to this one and say, that's not our job.
I'm a
Now it's-
zigzag guy, boy,
yeah.
I mean, you know, from there to there to there.
Well, no, now it's all in one place, and he's the director of it.
Okay, that's nice.
Dave, just a couple of things that might be for the benefit of everybody here. One, since this is Paula's first meeting up here in Belfair, maybe take a couple of minutes and
Right,
introduce.
so Paula is actually going to be the next phase 2, we're doing phases tonight. So, and she's going to talk about some of what we've already done this spring as far as loosening up some regulations on on-site septic and some other things, and then talk about some development regulations coming up. So this is Paula. Paula is my right-hand person in my office. We shout back and forth. We don't use intercom, we just yell back and forth.
Yeah.
But we're cranking out a ton of work, and Paula is really pushing hard on getting a lot of stuff that has been lagging behind for a long time up to speed. So we've made some significant improvements in process and in form, and we're charging forward. So, and Paula's a big driver of that. So Paula, if you want to.
And then just, I don't know, Paula, you might touch on these two issues, but getting rid of Tide Mark and moving to online permitting, the
I can
process
go
of
into
that.
Yes.
And then also the,
We'll stand up here
Right.
together.
So, one of the impediments we have is we're using some software called Tide Mark. And Tide Mark is our permitting, and it tracks code enforcement. It's basically we dump all of our information to. Tide Mark is out of date. It's no longer being serviced, so the copy we have is the last one. When it dies, it dies. So we're really being forced into moving forward to getting a new system. So the idea we're working on, and we're going out for proposals as of Friday, our RFPs are going out, is we're going to replace Tide Mark with a system that will allow people to do their permits from home. They'll be able to submit them from home and pay for them from home, so they won't even have to come into the office. And the nice thing about these systems is it will hold your work until all your pieces are together and submitted as a package. And then once it's submitted, you can check on its progress through the building department, through the planning department, through environmental health from home. So you'll be able to really interact with what's going on. The building inspectors will have live updates as they go out and do their on-site work, GPSing in wells and septic tanks, all those sorts of things. And it will automatically update. When they come back to the office, it updates and sends it on to the next person for more work. But it should really clear up a lot of the time we spend tracking down things that aren't correct. Plus, it allows the front counter staff time to deal with the really bigger problems that people bring in, where people really need someone to sit down with them and talk them through their projects. And that will really free up a lot of it. When we can take fences and decks and roofs and those things and get them done from home and get your permit issued over the internet, that's going to speed things up a lot.
Great. Thanks.
So thank you for the introduction. I think the biggest project right now is completing our comprehensive plan. That would be from 2016 through a 20-year look, 2036. So getting solid population forecast numbers so we can start, bringing a real look at the next 6 years and then 20. We're looking at everything from utilities to land use to housing to our capital facilities planning work, bringing in some level of service standards that will help the county in prioritization. And I see Loretta Swanson in the back from Public Works. We're doing a lot of work with Public Works and planning, and also kind of this, really our planners, a culture of sort of hand-holding with folks that are doing development work. So we have a helping and assistant kind of an approach in our office. And hopefully we're helping streamline some of the permitting processes through the environmental. We did adjust our permit fees slightly to accommodate some of these technological improvements we're making. And I wanted to mention that as part of this comprehensive plan process, we got some amendments requested by members of the public, a couple of rezones and some development regulation revision recommendations for here in Belfair. And they're all things that are very consistent with the goals in our comprehensive plan. They're consistent with cutting costs for stormwater management. They're consistent with the national and state requirements for transportation. There are some efficiencies that can help us help development be more cost effective. And so we're taking a close look at those in the Planning Commission, and we really think that that should help support and enhance the development opportunities here in Belfair. So, was there anything else you wanted?
The sewer. Do you want the sewer changes, or do you want me to?
You and I have been really close on this. Go ahead.
It came up at yesterday's meeting about the sewer, and that the community didn't know some of the changes that have already occurred. There's been, and there's more that's coming. Finally, after all these years, the moratorium that was holding back Belfair is no longer holding that back. We went through a public hearing, and we changed some of that with their great work to allow for new construction to occur in the Belfair area. They just have to be, when they do build, they have to build with the idea they're going to be hooking up to it. They have to build and have it in place, the structure that's going to take to hook into the sewer when it does come through. But now finally they are allowed to build in Belfair. If you want to have a mother-in-law home, you can now do it in Riverhill. And if you want to have a piece of property that you want to build your own home to live on, you can finally do it again in Belfair. Another thing that has occurred is $5,000 hookup fee for multifamily But next on the list is, and I've been tasked with working on that, to get it down to a $5,000 hookup for a year or 2-year period for new construction and stuff coming up, so that we can allow for some of these new things that are obviously coming right now, and there are quite a few people that are knocking on our doors. But the biggest news is your property value will change a little bit now, because now it's no longer hindered by not being able to build on it anymore if it's just raw land. So.
Yeah, and we've gone through this year on a number of items within our codes and taken a look at a lot of housekeeping and efficiency and things like that within our code. There were a lot of parts of it that didn't really line up with other parts and that really kind of needed to be streamlined and brought into compliance with itself in a lot of cases. And so I don't know that we could tip the hat anymore to our planning folks, but I think they've really shown what can be done if you take a hard look at things and try to solve problems instead of creating them. So we're very grateful for the effort that they're putting forward, and it's nice that they give us good things to vote on.
And as for the debt, things are moving. We've met with different entities, with the state and the federal government. Derek Kilmer, actually, we kept running into a problem with our loans that although the state was administering the loans, that they put them out, it was all on federal guidelines because it's actually federal money. So Derek Kilmer set some things up to bring the federal entities to the table with us to start talking about different opportunities, what we might be able to do for rearranging some of those funds. One of the things that came up is they're still locked quite a bit, but there's a possibility that we partner the phase 2 and going up into Kitsap County in one package. There might be a way to where they can rearrange all those loans again by doing that and wrap them all together, possibly without any forced hookups. There's a lot of things that have been changing lately, and we actually need to give a pat on the back to Dan Griffey for getting through that legislation that allowed us to, we were going to fight it anyway, we were going to release that moratorium, but because of the legislation that he actually put through, it actually, we don't have to fight it, we actually just take advantage of the law change to make it happen. So when you see him, make sure you thank him for that. But I'm meeting with Bremerton tomorrow. We're meeting with Bremerton tomorrow, and the Port of Bremerton as well, to look at some of the other options and what we can do to work together with them covering their share. And then my own belief, of course, is nobody gets hooked up without paying their share of a sewer system, because our community can't be expected to cover anybody else's. But that seems to be open. Everybody's open-minded about it, and it's some good possibilities going forward. So again, you need to thank Derek Kilmer on this one for working so hard to put that together, because again, it was him that did that, and it's his folks that are facilitating this meeting tomorrow as well. Yes.
You mentioned Dan and the separate on the state, so it's a state law.
Originally, it was always believed that we can get around some of that stuff, but the state law did not was saying that you shouldn't be hooking up giving rural services in an urban area. Just like you're not supposed to be providing urban services in a rural area. That's why the sewer can't go outside the areas. But Dan's bill allowed it to be a lot more flexible when it came to allowing for rural.
Under the initial sewage project, okay? Different administration, thank God. But anyhow, different administration in the commissioner's positions. The Growth Management Act never did say that, gee, we got a UGA, boom, we got to have all these things right now. It essentially said economically feasible, and we don't even have enough, well, I don't need to go into that. But anyhow, we don't have enough money as it is, okay? So what scares me a little bit when you said Dan changed the legislature and the state wrote a law, we in our infinite wisdom have written a lot of county ordinances. And if I'm not mistaken,
They already changed that part so that we can allow for it. That's what they had just brought forward. We just had a public
okay,
hearing on it a few weeks ago.
just because the state says you can go 70 miles an hour, the county can't go say, well, you can go 80, but they can tell you can only go 25, and that's legit, so.
Already done.
Okay.
Told you we had good.
Sometimes we stumble on ourselves, that's all I'm saying.
Well, it's like a bowl of spaghetti, we're just trying to get it straightened out.
Oh, God, it is. Oh, you're having fun for years.
And, Commissioner Netherland, I heard you mention phase two. What do you mean by phase two?
What I mean by phases anymore. Yeah, even though, remember, there's been a lot of statements of phases were removed. Phases were just removed from that document. It's not that phases just disappeared. You can put it under whatever name you want, but that would be the area that goes to the Newkirk and Old Belfair Highway region.
So it's back on, it sounds like it's back on the table,
It's never been off the table.
but it sounds like you're pursuing funding for it?
Right now, we're looking at all the different options to put together.
I just
And we always were.
I just wondered what you meant by phase two.
Yeah, and there never was no other point where it wasn't.
I just want to say, when you said phase two a minute ago, you said and with the possible connector, you combined any step we take next as phase two.
Basically,
Right.
yes, because the going up to Kitsap County would be all part of that same process. That may be the only way that, you can't get grants for economic development, okay? But you can't get these certain loans for residential. It's a weird combination that the federal government has put together. But if you put the two projects together, you have residential that's in an economic development platform that can be funded through the federal government through a granting process, and then residential be forgiven. Residential debt be forgiven. It's just how the government works. It's just.
Ken?
I think it's even more important than if that is on the, after that meeting we had last December, when the commission came up, I think it'd be good if this comes to pass that you have another meeting and inform the property owners to come to the meeting so that they.
We're not even that close yet, though.
No, but I mean,
Okay, yeah.
it's important. I mean, this is the first I've heard of it since last December, so.
This is the
There's other
first
people out
official
there.
meeting.
There are other people out there.
But I speak for myself, and I trust that Commissioner Nevin would agree. I think we're committed to a robust public process that takes everybody's opinion into account. Okay.
And just, one of the questions that was asked that had never been asked before, because of some of these things that are going on, when I was in the room with the federal government and the state people, I asked them straight out, what's the possibility that we may be able to get these grants and not force hookup? Where it's always been forced, it's always in our code to where they have to, that may be able to be removed from the requirement. And they're looking into that, and they'll be bringing some more of that information forward. But right now, just think everything stays the same until it changes.
Okay, well, that takes us to item 6, which is adjournment. We don't have to do a motion, because this is
Not a meeting.
yeah, so we are adjourned, but be happy to stay after and chat with anybody who has questions or comments. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.